Part 15. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 141. Zhang Luoshan closed her beautiful eyes and forced herself to suppress her surging emotions. Then, she opened her eyes again, looked at everyone, and said firmly, "Everyone, don't worry about me, and don't feel sorry for me anymore. Since I have committed such a heinous crime, I will naturally make amends. I will leave the Northern Territory. For the rest of my life, I will always follow my master, serve him like a dog and a horse, and make up for my sins." Her voice was sonorous and powerful, with endless determination. As soon as these words came out, everyone below froze again, staring at her in disbelief with their eyes wide open. "Is this true? Your Highness is going to abandon the Zhenbei Palace, leave the Northern Territory, and follow that tyrant? How can this be possible? What kind of spell did that tyrant cast on His Highness?" Everyone's heart was pounding, and an uncontrollable anger rose, wishing to rush down and tear the tyrant to pieces immediately. "Your Highness! No! Your Highness, you can't do this." After a short period of dead silence, the whole palace suddenly erupted with a huge roar, and everyone tried to dissuade them. "How dare you!" Li Han's eyes turned cold, and he shouted fiercely. In an instant, the whole palace was silent. "I have decided that no one should interfere." Zhang Luoshan's pretty face was frosty, and her voice was cold. Everyone was shocked when they heard the words, and they were as silent as cicadas, and dared not say a word. "Your Highness is the one who makes decisions, she has made a decision, and no one can change it." And at this moment, Qin Mu, who had been watching from the side, suddenly smiled and clapped his hands, praising. "I killed so many people to barely suppress them, and you, Zhang Luoshan, just said a few words, and they dared not say anything. It seems that you, Zhang Luoshan, have the final say in this northern border." Qin Mu's voice was full of teasing and ridicule. His eyes were deep, with a smile on his lips, staring at Zhang Luoshan quietly. Hearing Qin Mu's voice, Zhang Luoshan's heart trembled, and his bright almond eyes looked over. When their eyes met, Zhang Luoshan's face suddenly became hot, and she felt inexplicably flustered. She didn't know what she was thinking of, and her face became hotter and hotter. Her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Zhang Luoshan looked away unnaturally, not daring to look again, and whispered, "Master, you are joking. You have the final say over the entire Qin dynasty. What does the northern border count for?" She lowered her eyebrows and closed her eyes, her tone calm and respectful. "Oh." Qin Mu dragged out his voice. Then, he raised his right hand, pointed at the people kneeling under the city wall, and said indifferently, "Zhang Luoshan, are you willing to submit to me?" Qin Mu's voice was not loud, but it was clearly heard by everyone. His voice was not high-pitched, and it could even be said to be gentle. But when everyone heard this, their faces instantly turned red, their eyes were about to burst, and they were burning with anger. "No, you must not do this, Your Highness." All the people in the Northern Territory had this voice in their hearts at the same time. They can surrender, they can admit defeat, they can be slaves and servants. But only Your Highness cannot surrender. Zhang Luoshan is the last spiritual sustenance of the Northern Territory. If even Zhang Luoshan surrenders, then they will have no hope at all. And just as they were shouting wildly in their hearts, Zhang Luoshan was silent and did not speak. She lowered her head and could not see her expression clearly. After a long time, she gently raised her head, revealing a beautiful and flawless face, looking at Qin Mu, and slowly uttered 3 words. "I do." These simple 3 words made everyone in the Northern Territory below pale and shaken. Your Highness actually agreed, Your Highness really agreed. Your Highness, you actually want to submit to that tyrant. Then, under the gaze of all the people in the northern territory, Zhang Luoxian slowly bent her knees, her white and tender knees gently touched the ground, and she bowed down to Qin Mu. "Slave, Zhang Luoxian, kowtows to my lord." Her voice was low and calm, her posture was humble, and her movements were skillful and smooth, like flowing clouds and water, without any delay. This kneeling not only made countless people in the Northern Territory lose their souls, but also made Zhang Luoxian's heart of Taoism completely collapse. She heard a crisp sound in her ears, as if something was broken. Although this was not the first time she knelt to Qin Mu, it was the first time she knelt to Qin Mu in front of so many residents of the Northern Territory. These are two completely different concepts. Zhang Luoxian felt as if her soul was hollowed out, and the whole world became gray. Qin Mu smiled. He raised his foot and gently hooked Zhang Luoxian's chin with his toes, forcing her to look up and look at him. Then, Qin Mu raised his lips slightly. "I hope you mean what you said today, otherwise there will never be such an opportunity again." His voice was indifferent, with a hint of majesty. Zhang Luoxian felt bitter. But he still nodded. "Luo'er will remember the master's teachings and will never lie." Her voice was sincere and her eyes were pious, like a docile and well-behaved kitten. When everyone saw this scene, they all sighed in their hearts. But now that things have come to this, they can understand Zhang Luoxian's choice. And they should not impose their own ideas on Zhang Luoxian. "Very good." Qin Mu stroked Zhang Luoxian's snow-white forehead and said with a smile, "I believe you." Qin Mu retracted his foot, turned around and walked into the dragon chariot. Zhang Luoxian stood up, lowered his head and followed Qin Mu step by step. The two walked away, leaving behind the people of the northern border with a sad face, full of despair, resentment, and other complex expressions. Qin Mu left the northern border on the dragon chariot, but the Qin army never left. They will continue to monitor the northern border, disintegrate and suppress all doubts. At the same time, they will supervise the residents of the northern border to pay taxes, and those who violate the tax will be executed immediately. These orders were issued one by one and quickly implemented. In just 2 days, the entire northern border was completely cleared. All unstable factors were eliminated. Just when everyone thought that the northern border would be peaceful and silent, a shocking event broke out in the northern border. It instantly shocked the Qin dynasty and spread throughout the Tianlan region and even other surrounding regions at an incredible speed. One day, a beautiful valley in the north suddenly heard a loud noise that shook the sky. Then a group of extremely dense, almost liquid 7-color spiritual light burst out, blooming billions of rays of light, shaking the sky and disturbing the void. In just a moment, a hurricane suddenly blew between heaven and earth. Amid the sobbing, endless thunder exploded between the sea of clouds. The sky changed drastically, and strange signs appeared frequently. And then, a terrifying and vast wave rushed into the sky, shaking the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Then the valley rose up, forming a cave full of fairy air. An amazing vision appeared in the cave, and a ray of dazzling and extremely gorgeous fairy light rushed into the sky, evolving all things. The vision here instantly attracted the attention of countless people. What's going on? How could such a shocking vision appear? Countless people stopped practicing and rushed into the sky. In the Yaoguang Holy Land of the Apocalypse Domain, an old woman suddenly opened her eyes, and 2 terrifying golden lights shot out of her eyes. In an ancient courtyard in the Apocalypse Domain, a young man in white was sitting cross-legged in meditation. He suddenly opened his eyes and murmured, "Immortal cave? Or the 7-colored sky-repairing stone?" He flashed and tore through the void. In the Xiang Palace of the Wind Spirit Domain, a man shrouded in a hazy divine light opened his eyes and looked into the distance at the northern border with a cold look. In the Daking Dynasty of the Wind Spirit Domain, a middle-aged man sitting on the dragon throne opened his eyes flickering. In front of him, strange runes emerged, outlining pictures. His eyes fell on the picture, his eyes narrowed slightly, mysterious, and no one knew what he was thinking. In the nine-tailed skyfox clan of the demon domain, a woman in a black dress with a graceful figure and skin as white as snow suddenly woke up from her sleep. Her eyebrows and eyes are like paintings, her skin is whiter than snow, and her facial features are as delicate as the masterpiece of the creator. She is wearing a black long dress, her slender waist is slender, and she exudes amazing charm. Her pupils are deep, and two bright moons can be vaguely seen floating in her pupils. Dakin, interesting. She chuckled, and a strange arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. Demon realm. A dark figure woke up from a deep sleep, and there was a dark golden blood flame in his pupils, and his eyes were like stars in the night. Barbarian Holy Land. A burly man with muscular body, long hair, and black robe stood up suddenly. In an instant, the void roared, and there was a rolling blood in his limbs. Many elders of the savage Holy Land changed their faces. Tianlan Domain. In the forbidden land of life between the Qin dynasty and the barbarians, in a gloomy cave, a man with half of his head cut off and a ferocious face, like an evil ghost, opened his eyes and chewed bright red preserved fruit. This breath. The man's chewing stopped abruptly. The next moment, he suddenly stood up, took a step forward, and his body rose. In the blink of an eye, he crossed 1,000 feet and flew to the sky. Northern border. The man looked to the north, his eyes were extremely deep. Another bloody storm. He grinned with a wicked smile, then jumped down and merged into the earth. Among the many top forces, the old monsters who had been in seclusion for many years suddenly opened their eyes, and their eyes were terrifying. And on the same day, after receiving the request for help from Emperor Xuanhuan, the Ziwei Fairy Palace in the Tiankai domain originally only intended to condemn the Qin dynasty and did not support it, but they also sent out 10 saints at the first time. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 142. Dakin. Chang'an City. In the streets and alleys, tea houses, and taverns, almost everyone was talking about this amazing phenomenon. Did you hear it just now? A paradise suddenly appeared in the northern border. Pleasant Cave? I remember my father said that the northern border had long been turned into a ruin by His Majesty, so how could there be a paradise? Who knows? It is said that the paradise there is 1,000 feet high, with auspicious air steaming and precious light soaring into the sky, just like a fairy cave. Tisk tisk, is it true? Doesn't that mean that there will be a fairy cave in our Dakin? More than a fairy cave, it's simply the arrival of a fairy. Yes, I also heard, there are already fairy music lingering in the northern border, and fairy mist is everywhere, just like a fairy land. Yes, the fairy light of that cave paradise is too dazzling, it almost illuminates half of the sky. I also heard that the fairy cave is extraordinary and may contain amazing fortune. Haha, this is the real God bless my great Qin. That's right, with the fairy cave, our great Qin can cultivate more powerful people, and even give birth to fairy skills and fairy weapons. Countless people are inexplicably excited, discussing the fairy cave that suddenly appeared. Some people even propose to explore the fairy cave and obtain the fortune inside. Humph, stupid. In a luxurious restaurant in the east city of Chang'an City, a group of people gathered together, listening to the noisy and boiling discussions around them, and suddenly sneered. If it is really a cave of immortals, it is not a blessing from heaven for Dakin, but a disaster from heaven. A slightly older, tall, and handsome man spoke slowly. When these words came out, it was like a basin of cold water poured on everyone's head. Instantly, the restaurant fell into a dead silence. What do you mean? After a long time, someone finally asked hesitantly. You can think about it? If it is really a cave of immortals, it will definitely attract the covetousness of other powerful forces. At that time, what can Dakin use to resist? Seeing the puzzled look on everyone's face, the handsome man glanced around and asked lightly. When these words came out, everyone was stunned. Indeed, if there is really a cave paradise, it will inevitably attract the prying of other forces. Especially Dakin has just experienced a tragic battle, and its foundation has been consumed a lot. Going to war with other forces again is extremely dangerous. Once those forces learn that Dakin has an immortal cave, they will probably move out in full force. How can Dakin stop the invasion of those top sects? As soon as this question came out, everyone felt horrified. Although Dakin is strong, it is only the Xiangtian land domain. If it competes with the overlords of various domains for the immortal cave, it will definitely suffer huge losses. But if it does not compete, letting those forces enter the territory of Dakin will probably be a great trouble and a disgrace to the national prestige. This is a dilemma. When thinking of this, everyone can't help but feel a sense of depression. But, after all, that is our territory of Dakin. A young man hesitated to speak. The territory of the great Qin. The heroic man sneered, and said with a smile, the northern border does belong to the territory of the great Qin. But that is the immortal cave, and the fortune contained in it is far beyond imagination. If any force succeeds, it will be enough to make a sect rise again, even far beyond the peak. Do you think they will give up? When this was said, everyone was silent. The immortal cave, that is a rare opportunity that even saints are excited about, who would not covet it? Especially those sect-level forces, even the inheritance of a large sect may not be without the desire to compete for it. Everyone was silent for a long time, and then someone sighed. What should we do? Should we let other forces covet our great Qin? We can only give up, otherwise great Qin will be in danger. In fact, there is no need to give up. As long as your majesty is willing to share with other forces, then great Qin will not be besieged by other forces. That's right, what this Taoist friend said is very true. That's right. This sentence resonated with countless cultivators. As long as your majesty is willing to share the cave paradise in the northern border, then great Qin can turn danger into safety. After all, the value of the cave paradise is too huge. Even first-class sects, or even Holy Land level existences, find it difficult to resist this temptation. This is a crisis. A crisis greater than the joint attack of Xuanhuan, Kangyu, and the northern border on Chang'an. Alas! The heroic man sighed. He did not answer immediately, but turned his head to look outside the restaurant and at the palace. What to do specifically depends on your majesty's decision. After this sentence was uttered, the entire restaurant calmed down completely. I hope your majesty can make a wise choice. Someone murmured to himself. According to your majesty's character, do you think your majesty will choose to go to war with those forces directly? Someone suddenly said something. As soon as this was said, the originally stable atmosphere suddenly stagnated, and countless people's faces showed solemnity. Go to war? Are you crazy? Each of those big forces has a deep foundation and endless strength. How can they be defeated casually? Someone immediately shook his head and refuted. Your Majesty has a strong character and acts recklessly. Maybe he dares to do so. Someone looked gloomy and shook his head and smiled bitterly. Alas, how can we guess what your Majesty is thinking? Yes, this incident came too quickly, and I was caught off guard by the Qin dynasty. It was difficult to deal with it for a while. Alas, I hope your Majesty will not do something stupid. For a while, the atmosphere in the restaurant was depressed and filled with gloom. Chang'an City. In the Jinluan Hall, Qin Mu sat on the dragon chair, looking down at the ministers. The ministers knelt down and were very respectful. Qin Mu's eyes flashed, and he asked lightly. What do you think of the immortal caves in the north? Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 143. Qin Mu's eyes passed over the courtiers. Reply to your majesty. An old minister bowed and prostrate. The land in the north is the territory of our great Qin. If there is a blessed land in the cave, it will inevitably be spied on by countless people. This is the blessing and disaster of our great Qin. As soon as this statement came out, many ministers nodded, obviously agreeing with this statement. The temptation of Xuanhuan cave is too great. Once it appears, countless forces will probably head to the north in an instant. By then, it will be a big chaos, and as the host, the Qin will definitely bear the brunt of the impact. If it is not handled well, it will definitely be affected. Although Qin Mu had shown unprecedented strength and foundation in the Battle of Chang'an City, this was only a battle between three dynasties after all. What the Immortal Cave Mansion involves is the conflict of interests among all the top forces in several major regions. The two scales are completely different. Therefore, these ministers do not have much confidence in their hearts. Oh, what about Yi Iking's opinion? Qin Mu narrowed his eyes slightly and asked lightly. Reporting to your majesty, I believe that envoys should be sent immediately to inform the other domain overlords about this matter, and then decide whether to open the Xuanhuan cave. When the old minister heard this, he bowed and said, "That makes sense. Your majesty, please tell me clearly." "Yes, this is a big matter and needs to be discussed." In an instant, civil servants expressed their opinions one after another. They were unwilling to give up on this visit to the Xuanhuan cave. After all, once opened, it is not only a fairy treasure, but most importantly, the opportunities hidden in it are enough to change your destiny. But if the Qin wants to monopolize it, it will inevitably be coveted by other forces. The best solution is to share it and explore the Immortal Cave together. This would not only ensure that the Qin would not gain hostility from other forces, but also obtain the treasures in the Immortal Cave. Every civil servant spoke righteously and made impassioned speeches. However, some military generals held objections. "Your Majesty, I suggest that you send an elite force to the north to guard the cave heaven paradise and prevent foreign enemies from invading." A military general stood up and asked for orders in a deep voice. As soon as this statement came out, it immediately triggered a chorus of echoes. This is a perfect move. It will not only intimidate the younger generation, but also demonstrate the country's prestige, so that our country, the Qin dynasty, will never fall. Our great Qin majesty cannot be offended, and we must make those little ones fearful. That's right, the Xuanhuan cave mansion belongs to our great Qin. How can it fall into the hands of others? All the generals raised their arms and shouted, motivating them to forge ahead, and their blood was boiling. After the battle in Chang'an City, the confidence of these generals was unprecedentedly strong. I have more and more faith in His Majesty. They believe that with His Majesty here, the Qin army will be invincible. Your Majesty. That's wrong. The ownership of the immortal family's cave heaven is not decided by our great Qin family, nor can it be suppressed by just a few elites. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly interrupted. As far as I know, the Apocalypse region, which is closest to the Tianlan region, has 8 major sects, and the Qingming sect, the weakest among them, has at least 10 strong saints sitting in charge. In addition, the 3 sects of Sirius, Ziwei, and Yaoguang are even more powerful. They not only have saints, but also imperial soldiers. If we send out troops rashly, it will not only be difficult to seize the fairy family cave, but it may suffer heavy losses and make wedding clothes for others. The man walked out slowly, his face solemn. As soon as these words came out, all the civil servants nodded in agreement. That's right, Your Majesty. Although our great Qin is strong, the opponents we face are even more dangerous. A minister handed over. I believe that in order to avoid unnecessary casualties, it should be shared with other forces. I also agree that the immortal cave in the north is related to the fate of the country. Please think twice. Another person walked out and said solemnly. I second the proposal. I second the proposal. Civil servants came out one by one and raised objections. Although the fairy cave is tempting, you have to have your life to take it. And at this time, although the generals were still dissatisfied, they had to admit that this statement was reasonable. Just pick one of the 8 major sects in the apocalypse domain and it can be called a top force. It is simply not something that an elite group can compete with. Not to mention the various forces in wind spirit domain and other places. In just a short moment, most of the civil servants in the court had expressed their opinions, but only one person remained silent. This is Wang Xing, the Minister of Household Affairs and the Minister of Rights. Qin Mu raised his eyes slightly, glanced at Wang Xing, and asked lightly, I wonder how Wang Iking views this matter. Wang Xing bowed slightly, Your Majesty, I think this matter should be considered carefully. Qin Mu nodded, rested his chin on his hand, looked at him with interest and asked. Then in Wang Iking's opinion, how should the Qin handle this matter? After hearing Qin Mu's words, Wang Xian pondered for a moment, looked solemn, and spoke again. Your Majesty, we can neither sit idly by and occupy the Xianjia cave in the north, nor can we easily occupy it. On the contrary, we can use diplomatic means to negotiate and cooperate with other forces. Qin Mu nodded and smiled slightly, so, Wang Iking also supports giving up the immortal family cave in the north. When Wang Xing heard this, cold sweat suddenly broke out on his forehead. Especially when he saw the smile on the corner of Qin Mu's mouth, his heart trembled. He suddenly thought to himself, it's over now. I must have guessed His Majesty's thoughts wrongly. Wang Xing wanted to give himself a slap at this time. He is known as His Majesty's #1 fan, how could he guess His Majesty's meaning wrongly at this time? Wang Xing's whole body stiffened and he thought quickly in his mind. As a minister who has witnessed His Majesty's moodiness many times, he knows how terrifying His Majesty's moodiness is. It ranges from being transferred and demoted, to severe being beheaded and killed by 9 clansmen. Even the lady and her family members will be forcibly taken away. When he thought of that result, cold sweat broke out on Wang Xing's forehead, and a layer of oil appeared on his fat face. Your Majesty has misunderstood. Wang Xing immediately knelt on the ground, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and said hurriedly. Our great Qin dominates the Tianlan territory, and the world is at peace, and the people live and work in peace and contentment. It is naturally inappropriate to give up the immortal family cave in the north to other forces. This is really an insult to the country's prestige. So I feel that we should. Wang Xing's speaking speed can be described as extremely fast, and his desire to survive is directly at full capacity. But before he finished speaking, he was lightly interrupted by Qin Mu. I think Wang Iking is right. The ownership of the cave heaven of the immortal family in the north is indeed not suitable for me, great Qin, to have exclusively. This matter should be cooperated with other forces to conspire with the immortal family cave. Qin Mu nodded slightly, and an inexplicable light flashed in his eyes. According to my decree, the northern border will be opened from now on, allowing any force to enter. As soon as he finished speaking. What? Ah! Hearing this, the entire hall suddenly burst into uproar. For a moment, everyone was stunned. No one thought that His Majesty would actually agree to this. Originally, They were all ready to risk their lives to persuade him, but they didn't expect His Majesty to agree so readily. The eyes of many courtiers were focused on Qin Mu, as if they were observing whether this was His Majesty. Wang Xing, the Minister of Revenue, was even more stunned. He opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. He began to doubt himself a little. His Majesty's thoughts are so difficult to fathom. Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is so kind, I admire you. Your Majesty is wise and mighty. Soon, all the ministers kowtowed and complimented him endlessly. Even some veterans had tears in their eyes and were full of excitement. Your Majesty is finally willing to listen to their advice? So touched. The sky has eyes. Your Majesty finally stopped being stupid and made a wise decision. All the ministers shed tears and burst into tears. They finally experienced the joy of successful remonstrance. This is simply more comfortable than taking an elixir. Until Qin Mu retired and left the Jinluan Hall, there were still many ministers immersed in this joy. Why do you think His Majesty suddenly changed his mind and started to listen to our advice? A white-haired veteran asked while wiping his tears. Yes. In the past, His Majesty always went against our advice every time, but not this time. How strange. His Majesty's actions have always been absurd, and they never expected that their advice would be so effective. Perhaps it's because His Majesty finally sees his shortcomings clearly. Well, this is very possible. As long as we can tell His Majesty in time, I believe His Majesty will slowly restrain himself. De Qin, can be saved. All the civil servants were whispering and discussing, and they were suddenly full of confidence in the future of Great Qin. At this time, a civil servant suddenly whispered. Do you think it's because the imperial advisor is not here this time that your Majesty will listen to our advice? As soon as these words came out, the whole place fell silent. Don't tell me, it's really possible. In the past, it was useless even for the imperial master to carry the coffin to court. It seems that the national preceptor cannot be allowed to speak in the future. Yeah, that makes sense. For a time, all the ministers agreed. At this time, Du Yulin, the national advisor who was far away in the Xuanhuan dynasty, suddenly sneezed, rubbed his nose, and looked suspicious. Strange, why did you suddenly sneeze? Could it be that you are acclimated? At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 144. Du Yulin frowned, and he sensed the surroundings and found no suspicious situation. It may be that the recent series of battles have consumed too much energy. It should be nothing serious. Shaking his head, Du Yulin stopped thinking about this problem. He had besieged the Xuanhuan imperial capital for several days and blocked wave after wave of Xuanhuan reinforcements. All those who dared to come to rescue him were killed by him outside the city gate. The soldiers of the Xuanhuan dynasty could not withstand his offensive at all, and suffered heavy casualties. Corpses were everywhere, and the smell of blood was strong and pungent. However, such a record was obviously nothing to Du Yulin. After all, this level of victory or defeat was not enough to make him proud. At this time, Du Yulin already knew the result of the battle in Chang'an City. After he learned that His Majesty had repelled and killed 9 saints, he was shocked at first, and then ecstatic. Although he had great confidence in his own Majesty, he still did not expect this result. At that moment, Du Yulin burst into tears, his blood boiled, and he even wanted to shout to the sky. Dakin won. Won beautifully. Won heartily. So he couldn't hold Dakin back, he had to give His Majesty a more satisfactory answer. He still had a lot to do. His goal was to break through the defense line, completely occupy the Xuanhuan imperial capital, and completely eradicate the Xuanhuan dynasty from the Tianlan region. Only in this way can he live up to His Majesty's high hopes and trust in him. Report. Report to the Imperial Master. At this time, a guard suddenly ran over. What's wrong? Seeing the guard panic, Du Yulan frowned and vaguely noticed something unusual. The guard swallowed his saliva, his legs trembled, and he said with difficulty. Report to the Imperial Master. According to reliable information, the Ziwei Immortal Palace in the Tiankai domain will send 10 saints to support the Xuanhuan dynasty. What? The words of the guard made Du Yulan's pupils shrink suddenly, and his face suddenly changed. 10 saints. Is the news reliable? Du Yulan asked quickly. The news came from the Tiankai domain. It has been confirmed that the saints sent by the Ziwei Immortal Palace have set off and are heading to the Tianlan domain. It is estimated that they will arrive in Xuanhuan soon. The guard lowered his head and said anxiously. What a Ziwei Immortal Palace! Hearing this, Du Yulan's face was extremely solemn. He took a few deep breaths to suppress his anger. He never thought that this time the Xuanhuan dynasty actually asked for 10 saints to support. At this moment, Du Yulan finally understood why the Xuanhuan dynasty had been guarding this imperial capital with no fear. It turns out that their backer is Ziwei Immortal Palace. This time, we are in trouble. After a long time, Du Yulan uttered these words, his heart full of haze. Ziwei Immortal Palace is definitely one of the best sects in Tiankai domain. And the most important thing is that Ziwei Immortal Palace once produced a great emperor, who is a well-known existence of the human race. Although the great emperor has long passed away, the foundation and deterrence he left behind are still daunting and cannot be ignored. Therefore, the influence of Ziwei Immortal Palace is extraordinary, not only in Tiankai domain, but also in the entire human race's 9 domains. 10 saints. With his current strength, it is simply difficult to resist. What worries Du Yulan even more is that the great Qin dynasty has just ended the battle. There must be no more chaos. Ziwei Fairy Palace? I'm afraid they are not only here to support the Xuanhuan dynasty, but also to come for the immortal ruins in the north. Du Yulan's eyes flickered, he murmured, and his mind was calculating rapidly. He kept deducing, planning, and correcting various mistakes, hoping to find a solution. After a while, his face became heavier and heavier. This was an unsolvable battle. If Ziwei Fairy Palace got involved, he would not be sure to win. He even had no hope of winning. It seems that I can only give up. Du Yulan sighed lightly, his face dimmed. Reluctance appeared in his eyes, and his heart was filled with sadness. For this expedition against the Xuanhuan dynasty, he carried the coffin and went out to fight, and devoted too much effort. But he didn't expect that even so, he would still disappoint His Majesty's expectations in the end. Alas! Du Yulan sighed deeply, he slowly closed his eyes, and had already accepted the judgment of fate. Master Kuashi, what should we do now? The guards asked anxiously. The rest of the soldiers were also extremely nervous, their eyes focused on Du Yulan, waiting for his instructions. Forget it. Withdraw. Go back to Dakan. Du Yulan said helplessly. He opened his eyes and looked indifferently at the towering city walls in the distance and the red sun banner floating above the palace. His eyes gradually became cold, and he said word by word, one day, I will come back to kill again. Then Du Yulan said, I will inform His Majesty, you must gather the army immediately. Yes. The guards immediately bowed and left, ready to summon the army back to Dakan. However, at this moment, there were bursts of loud noises from the sky, like thunder, deafening. Boom! The earth was shaking, the sky was wailing, and the void was collapsing. The heaven and earth were shaking violently, as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was cracking, which was terrifying. Then, an extremely terrifying aura of killing filled the sky and swept across the world. With the advent of the overwhelming momentum, the whole world seemed to fall into darkness. What happened? Everyone was shocked, and many people couldn't help but take a breath of cold air, and felt a chill on their backs. The cold and solemn aura of killing made people shudder, their hair stood on end, and their souls seemed to be trembling. Du Yulin suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky, with a terrifying light in his eyes. I saw 10 dazzling beams of light rising up in the distant sky, illuminating the whole world. That is. Du Yulin's pupils shrank slightly, and he instantly recognized that those beams of light were wrapped in 10 dazzling and gorgeous long swords. Each of them exuded a shocking murderous intent and pressure, and the sharp sword light was frightening. In the center of the 10 sword lights, a brilliant stream of light rushed up into the sky, carrying a mighty holy power and rushing outward. In an instant, the void twisted, the sky and the earth darkened, as if the end of the world had come, and the wind and rain were swaying. Then, under the shocked eyes of everyone, an old man appeared out of thin air at the top of the sky. He stepped on the void, and although his body was withered and short, it was as majestic as a giant mountain. Around him, the void collapsed, and black holes appeared all around, which seemed mysterious. He stood in the vast sky and earth, as if he had merged with the world, and his breath was extremely terrifying. But at this time his voice was full of incredibleness. How did you appear in the palace? At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 145. The old man said angrily, his old face full of anger. Because opposite him, there stood a graceful figure. She was wearing a black dress, her skin was as white as cream, and her hair was like a waterfall on both sides of her shoulders. Her delicate and flawless face was too beautiful to be real. Especially those eyes as bright as stars, shining, clear and pure as gems. But the strange thing was that there was no emotion in those eyes, as cold as ice for thousands of years. She did not answer the old man, but stretched out her hand, and the 10 brilliant and imposing long swords suddenly shot back and fell into her palm. Buzz! The 10 magic swords rang together, clanging like dragons and phoenixes, and the sword intent was crisscrossed. These are the 10 magic swords of my Xuanhuan dynasty. How could they fall into your hands? The old man was shocked and stared at the 10 magic swords in the hands of the woman in the black dress. These 10 divine swords were made by the ancestors of the Xuanhuan dynasty. They have always been the treasures of the Xuanhuan dynasty. I didn't expect that they were stolen by the other party. Kill. Suddenly, the woman opened her cherry lips and uttered a word coldly. As soon as the voice fell, 10 long swords suddenly burst out with dazzling light, tearing through the sky and slashing at the old man. The 10 long swords burst out with blazing light, and the sword energy intertwined into an impenetrable sword net, covering the sky, and blocking everything. The sword force was magnificent and majestic, and the sky and the earth suddenly lost their color, and the sun and the moon lost their light. The old man's face changed drastically, and he quickly withdrew and retreated to avoid the sharp edge. His reaction was extremely swift, and he disappeared without a trace in an instant. 10 dazzling rainbows passed over his head, slashing the void, shattering the ground, rolling dust and smoke. Countless buildings were destroyed in an instant, and suffered devastating damage. Can you escape? The woman glanced indifferently at the direction where the old man disappeared, her eyes still clear and calm, without any ripples. Soon the figure of the old man appeared, his face uncertain. He looked cold, his turbid eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he stared at the woman in black dress with hatred. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? The old man was furious, and 2 terrifying fierce lights burst out of his turbid old eyes. He waved his sleeves and pulled out the whisk in his hand. In an instant, thousands of silk ribbons fell down, like a 1,000-foot dragon, and hit hard. This scene shocked everyone. They stared at the battlefield in front of them with wide eyes. The woman's clothes fluttered, her black skirt fluttered, and her black hair fluttered. She looked indifferent, her face was absolutely beautiful, Her eyes were deep, as calm as an ancient well, and she didn't move even when the old man attacked. She raised her white hand lightly, and her white and slender 5 fingers formed a seal, like a blooming lotus, crystal clear, emitting a rich glow, and went forward to attack. The weak and white slender jade arm contained a terrifying power. There was only a muffled bang, and the piece of silk ribbon burst instantly, turning into silk threads all over the sky, disappearing into the void. Then she slapped out a palm lightly. The void collapsed, and a frenzy was set off between heaven and earth. A palm slapped down. Puff. The old man vomited blood and flew across the sky, falling to the ground, his breath weak and extremely embarrassed. At this time, the figure of the woman in black skirt suddenly disappeared from the spot. When she appeared again, she had come to the red sun banner above the palace. The old man's face suddenly changed, and he exclaimed, "Don't touch it. It's a pity that it was too late." The woman in black skirt stretched out her slender jade hand and gently pressed on the red sun banner. Buzz. Instantly, the red sun banner shook violently, and a strong red light burst out. Red flames burst out, burning the sky, almost drowning the sky. The old man ignored the pain on his body, flashed, and then suddenly grabbed the red sun banner pole, trying to pull it back with all his strength. But just as he exerted his strength, the woman in black skirt suddenly appeared again and attacked again. The woman in black skirt took a light step, crossed the space, came to the old man, raised her hand and stabbed with a sword. At this moment, the old man's pupils contracted, and there was a look of horror in his eyes. The sword was too fast, so fast that he couldn't react at all. Red sun burns the sky, burn for me. At the critical moment, the old man shouted angrily, and a raging flame rose around him, like a fire god born from fire, burning the sky. He was bathed in flames, and frantically urged the mana in his body to pour into the red sun banner. In an instant, the red sun banner swelled in the wind, and the flag fluttered, blocking the sword. This is the red sun banner that the Xuanhuan imperial family has worshipped for generations. It has the ability to reach the sky and penetrate the earth, and is one of the Xuanhuan imperial family's trump cards. However, facing such a terrifying flame, the woman still looked cold and her eyes were deep, as if there was no fluctuation at all. She exerted a little force on her wrist, and actually resisted the extremely high temperature sea of fire, and took the red sun banner from the old man's hand. The old man's pupils shook, and he lost his voice and said, You are not human." At this moment, the red sun banner that was out of his control had lost its protective function. The barrier disappeared. The Xuanhuan imperial capital was completely exposed to the iron cavalry of the Qin army. Boom! The boundless Qin army rushed and roared, sweeping in like a torrent, crushing everything. The people and officials in the Xuanhuan imperial capital were all terrified, collapsed to the ground, and couldn't believe their eyes. The Xuanhuan imperial capital was actually captured. Xuanhuan Emperor Yuan even cried out in grief. No. In just 2 hours, the Xuanhuan dynasty was destroyed. The streets outside the entire imperial city were full of corpses and body parts, and blood gathered into a river, dyeing the ground red. Whether it was the city, the village, or the valley outside the city, they were all turned into ruins and scorched earth. The Qin army finally destroyed the Xuanhuan dynasty. The war is over. Du Yuan looked at the Xuanhuan emperor who committed suicide, and his heart was a little complicated. In fact, he had originally prepared to go home. But he didn't expect such a change. The situation was urgent at the time, and he had no time to think about it, so he had to issue an order to launch an attack. But when everything was over, Du Yuan realized that the problem seemed to be a bit serious. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Len. Chapter 146. Although he came here to destroy Xuanhuan, this was not a good time. The Ziwei Immortal Palace is coming fiercely, probably not to support the Xuanhuan dynasty, but to the Immortal Cave Mansion in the north. Now that the Xuanhuan dynasty was destroyed, Ziwei Immortal Palace could just find an excuse to invade the northern territory of Great Qin. Thinking of this, Du Yulin's brows furrowed deeper and deeper. But even if the Xuanhuan dynasty is not destroyed, the Ziwei Immortal Palace will definitely find ways to enter the north. It just lacks a more justified reason. Furthermore, the actions of Saint Xuanhuan in seizing the Red Sun flag and breaking through the barrier must have been ordered by His Majesty. Perhaps Your Majesty already has a secure solution. Du Yulin murmured to himself. Things have come to this point, everything has become a done deal, and it is impossible to change it anymore. We can only continue to go down. Report. National Preceptor, the army has cleared the imperial city, the city walls have collapsed, and no one is alive. From the camp of the King of Qin's army, a report came from a personal guard. Oh? Where is that saint from the Xuanhuan kingdom? Du Yulin nodded slightly when he heard this, and immediately asked. The returning master has been beheaded by 2 saints, and his soul has been destroyed. The guard said respectfully. Du Yulin was slightly silent after hearing this, and then said slowly. Let people converge on the battlefield, clear the traces, and leave no clues. Yes, I accept the order. The bodyguard nodded and bowed to exit. Your Majesty, you hide everything from me, which always makes me feel uneasy. When the guards retreated, Du Yulin looked at the distant sky, his eyes full of worry. In the past, he thought he knew His Majesty's character best. But after this battle, he found that he could not see through His Majesty more and more. Forget it, the soldiers will come to cover up the water and the earth. Since Your Majesty has arranged it this way, there must be a reason for it. Du Yulin shook his head and stopped thinking. He knew it was useless to think so much. But before he turned around, his expression suddenly became slightly frozen. Then he suddenly raised his head, looked at the distant sky, and narrowed his eyes. This is... Du Yulin murmured to himself. Where is Du Yulin? Come out and die. At this moment, an extremely angry shout suddenly resounded throughout the world. The roaring sound resounded through the sky, and the sound waves spread like thunder for thousands of miles, deafening, resounding throughout the world, shaking the whole world. It made countless people on the earth tremble, and even couldn't help but want to kneel on the ground. I saw the sky and the earth rolling around, and the wind and clouds turbulent. A ray of silver light penetrated the void, pierced the sky, and charged straight towards the great Qin king's master. Who is this, the pressure of a saint? Could they be remnants of the Xuanhuan dynasty? This sudden scene immediately attracted the attention of all Qin soldiers, and countless people were shocked and confused. There were actually saints in the Xuanhuan dynasty? He is a saint from the Xuanhuan dynasty. Du Yulin's pupils shrank and he made a quick judgment. He had already learned from a minister of the Xuanhuan dynasty that the Xuanhuan dynasty did not send all the saints to Chang'an, but left 2 saints to guard the imperial capital and the border areas respectively. Now the saint in the Xuanhuan imperial capital has been beheaded, and the one who came is the saint guarding the Xuanhuan border, and he is also the last saint in the Xuanhuan dynasty. Just in time. But soon, a smile appeared on the corner of Du Yulin's mouth, and there was a cold light in his eyes. He had completed his mission at this time and was worried that he could find no trace of the saint. Now he could catch them all in one go. To prevent the other party from hiding in the dark and attacking Qin in the future, that would be really troublesome. Thinking of this, Du Yulin suddenly raised his right hand, and a sword rainbow suddenly shot into the sky. In an instant, the sword light tore through the sky, instantly splitting half of the sky with a huge gap, shining brightly into the world, reflecting the heavens. At the same time, he took one step forward and climbed into the sky. The infinite Gangchi exploded, setting off strong winds and flying sand, sweeping in all directions, covering everyone. How dare you stop me even though you're just killing me? The woman's voice was full of disdain and arrogance, and was extremely indifferent, as if a god was looking down at ants in the mortal world. As the woman finished speaking, a huge blue cloud suddenly appeared on the horizon in the distance. The cyan cloud shadow covered the sky, and it was majestic, rolling in like thunder. In an instant, it spanned thousands of feet and landed on the earth. Boom! In an instant, the sky collapsed and the earth shattered, the sun and moon lost light, and the entire imperial city shook violently. And above the cloud shadow, stood a tall, beautiful woman with fluttering clothes. She has a cool temperament and her skin is as crystal clear as mutton fat white jade. The whole body is surrounded by endless clouds and mist, and the breath is misty, like a fairy. And behind her, there was a bronze spear hanging. The spears lay horizontally, extremely sharp, and the scarlet evil energy flowing on them could be vaguely seen. Just a wisp almost stings people's eyes, making it difficult to look straight. At this time, the woman's eyes were looking at Du Yulin coldly and indifferently, not hiding her strong murderous intention and hostility. Facing such a fierce and domineering gaze, Du Yulin was not afraid at all. Are you the last saint of the Xuanhuan kingdom? Du Yulin stood in the sky, his eyes indifferent. I am Fairy Qinglian. The woman's veil fluttered, revealing an exquisite face. Her phoenix eyes were narrow and bright, containing a coldness that looked down on all living beings. Fairy Qinglian. When Du Yulin heard these 4 words, he frowned slightly, and information about the other party flashed through his mind. Fairy Qinglian is the youngest saint in the Xuanhuan dynasty. She is extremely beautiful and is said to have entered the ranks of saints in less than 1,000 years of cultivation. She is extremely powerful and is known as the first female saint in the Xuanhuan dynasty. She guards the border and intimidates foreign monsters. She is also very warlike. In addition, she has no worries about her lifespan, so she has gone to the monster territory many times to conquer and has made outstanding military achievements. It's you, Ye Qinglian. After listening to Fairy Qinglian's words, Du Yulin's eyes flickered. The other party's surname is Ye, and he is the ancestor of the Xuanhuan dynasty. He looks young on the surface, but in fact he is at least 1,000 years old. Fairy Qinglian trembled her right hand, and the bronze spear trembled, as if there was an endless murderous aura rising up, turning into a raging river of blood, filling the sky. The tip of the spear emitted a cold light, locking onto Du Yulin from a distance. Fairy Qinglian said coldly. Du Yulin, my Xuanhuan dynasty has already been defeated, why do you still want to kill us all? At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 147. Ye Qinglian's eyes were very cold. When she saw that the Xuanhuan imperial city had become a ruin, although she did not show anything on her face, she was extremely sad in her heart. She even secretly hated herself for going to the demon domain to kill the demons, which led to her late support. That's right, when Emperor Xuanhuan asked her for support, she was killing the demons. When she hurriedly arrived, she found that everything was too late. If she could return to help in time, perhaps Xuanhuan could be saved. Yet Qinglian was filled with remorse. But at this time, she could only forcibly suppress her inner sadness, and then kill these invaders to avenge Xuanhuan. Why didn't you come forward to condemn when your Xuanhuan royal family slaughtered my Dakan people? Now you blame my Dakan? Ridiculous. Du Yulin stood with his hands behind his back and sneered. You. Hearing this, Ye Qinglian was furious. It was indeed a fact that Xuanhuan invaded Dakan, and even if she was a saint, she could not refute it. She gritted her teeth and said, "No matter what, I will take your lives today." Before she finished speaking, a dark yellow haze lingered on Yekinglian's body. The haze was golden in color, swaying like water waves. Afterwards, countless runes bloomed, connecting the void, revealing mysterious symbols, and combining into various strange patterns. And in each scroll, there was a powerful existence standing on it, releasing terrifying fluctuations. Those scrolls were countless monster souls. In each scroll, a big monster was sealed. There were 600 or 700 of them, gathered together at this moment, with a momentum that shook the world, and terrifying fluctuations spread out. "Today, I will use your blood to sacrifice to the dead souls of Xuanhuan." Yekinglian's eyes were extremely cold, and his voice was icy cold. "Chi." As soon as the voice fell, the golden haze on her body suddenly shook, and then turned into a gorgeous golden flame, burning up. "Go." Yekinglian raised her finger and pointed. The demon beast souls instantly turned into illusions, like real objects, roaring and rushing. Roar, roar, roar. The earth-shaking roar resounded through the void, and 600 or 700 demon beast souls rushed over frantically, covering the sky and the earth, making people's scalps explode. Each of these demon beast souls has the cultivation of the Yuanshen realm, and some of them have even reached the existence of the Zandao realm. They roared and rushed towards Du Yulin, wanting to tear Du Yulin apart. Facing this terrifying scene, Du Yulin's forehead was slightly sweaty. Once the saint gets serious, he really can't stop it. But he was not too scared, nor did he dodge, but was at ease as a target, attracting Yekinglian's firepower. That's right, he was just a target. There is someone else who can deal with Yekinglian. As expected, in the next moment, a flash of knife light flashed, and a black sword with a sinister aura stretched across the vastness, directly blocking Yekinglian's attack. The blades intersected, and endless sparks splashed. "Huh? There is a holy soldier." Feeling the surging and powerful holy power fluctuations in the opponent's knife light, Yekinglian frowned slightly, showing surprise. But the next moment, a sarcastic smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and she spoke lightly. "Sure enough, there is a saint. Since he has come, why doesn't he dare to show up and fight? Are you planning to be a turtle?" The voice was cold and pleasant, spreading all over the field, but there was no response. Yekinglian's eyes were slightly focused, and he searched carefully, but he never found any trace of the saint. "What kind of saint is this if you sneak around?" she shouted tenderly, and the spear in her hand suddenly shot out, with a dazzling bronze glow, suddenly piercing through the void and stabbing forward. And at this moment, another brilliant sword light suddenly appeared, as if it flew out from the bottom of the nine netherworld, extremely fast, and instantly pierced through the void. Yekinglian was caught off guard, and her arm was rubbed by the sword light, and blood burst out in an instant. This scene made Yekinglian's eyes shrink suddenly. There are actually two saints. Feeling the fluctuations of the holy power in the sword and knife, Yekinglian's pretty face couldn't help but show a trace of solemnity. But she was not afraid in her heart. She had seen bigger scenes than this several times. When she single-handedly broke into the demon domain, she was chased by more than a dozen great demon kings, but she finally escaped, and even severely injured 3 of them. Just thinking about this, 2 fluctuations suddenly emerged from her side. 2 equally gorgeous women stood on her left and right. One was dressed in white, with a stunning appearance, noble and elegant temperament, like a fairy exiled from the mortal world, beautiful and pure. The other was dressed in a black dress, charming and enchanting, with a curvy figure and sharp eyes. Women? So young. Seeing the 2 women appear, Yekinglian was stunned and a little stunned. When did Dakan have 2 such young female saints? Yekinglian blinked, full of confusion. She originally thought that she was the youngest female saint in Tianlan domain, but now it seems that this is not the case. These two female saints look much younger than her. Ye Qinglian's desire to win suddenly came up. He didn't believe that there was a female saint in Tianlan domain who was younger, more beautiful, and more powerful than her. Impossible, impossible. Who are you? Ye Qinglian glanced at the two girls and asked in a deep voice. However, the two women ignored Ye Qinglian. They looked at the monster souls with ferocious faces, with indifference in their eyes. Then, what the woman in a black dress said shocked Ye Qinglian even more. Xuanhuan, if we capture this female saint and present it to the master will definitely be very happy, right? The woman in the black dress spoke calmly, as if she was describing a normal thing. Hearing this, the woman in white clothes on the side, who looked like an immortal, nodded. Except for us, the master has never used a real female saint. The master will definitely praise us. Ah, Ye Qinglian was surprised. She frowned deeply, opened her mouth slightly, and couldn't help scratching her head. Two big question marks appeared in her beautiful eyes. Wait a minute, the amount of information in these two sentences is a bit too much for her to digest. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 148. Master. To whom? What is a true female saint? What does used mean? The more Ye Qinglian listened, the more confused she became. She felt her mind was in a mess. A saint is a supreme being that is above countless cultivators, with supreme status and strength. But the two women in front of her actually said master? Who is worthy of being the master of a saint? Could it be the emperor? But there is no emperor now. Could it be a quasi-emperor? But I have never heard of a quasi-emperor in Dakan. Ye Qinglian frowned, her mind was racing, and she thought of many things. But she still couldn't figure it out. At this moment, the two women seemed to have finished their discussion, and no longer spoke, but attacked at the same time. The black-dressed woman's eyes were sharp, and she suddenly drew an arc with a long sword in her hand, and slashed at Ye Qinglian fiercely. Clang! In an instant, the sky was full of sword light, wrapping Ye Qinglian in it, forming a huge net that covered the 4 fields and 8 wastelands. This sword was faster than thunder and fierce. Humph! Feeling the powerful force contained in this sword, Ye Qinglian snorted coldly and clenched her slender hands into fists. The next moment, Ye Qinglian took a slight step, and the whole person rose from the ground, rushed into the sky, and faced the sword shadows all over the sky. And behind her, the phantoms of the monsters in the sky also roared and rushed towards the sword shadows all over the sky. Bang! In an instant, the sky shook and the earth shook, and the spiritual clouds rolled. Hundreds of phantoms of monsters collided with the sword shadows in the sky, bursting out with extremely bright and blazing energy light. The collision between the two made a loud noise, set off a hurricane of 10,000 feet, whistling past, and all the surrounding mountains collapsed. The world trembled because of the collision of the two energies, and an indescribable wave of destruction spread, which made the people watching the battle in the distance horrified and retreated. Under the impact of this terrifying energy, many people couldn't bear it and vomited blood. Retreat, retreat quickly, Du Yulin's face changed wildly, and he shouted hurriedly. The battle continued. The woman in the white dress also joined the battle at this time. She stood in the air with a cold look, raised her hand to make a seal, and pointed out with one finger. The cracks in the void spread, and the world shook violently. A huge pillar of light penetrated the sky, like a pillar of light that penetrated the sky, illuminating the entire world, and directly suppressed Ye Qinglian. Damn it! Seeing the arrival of this pillar of light, Ye Qinglian's face was uncertain. Blue lotus blooms. She shouted in a low voice, and her whole body was boiling with spiritual power. The next moment, the sky was full of green spiritual light, and bright blue lotuses bloomed in the void, like a dream. Each one was crystal clear, as if carved from gems. Go. Then, she flicked her finger, and these blue lotuses suddenly whistled out and rushed towards the pillar of light across the sky. Bang! The light column collided with Qinglian, making a sound like the sound of a heavenly drum. Ripples visible to the naked eye spread rapidly in all directions with the collision point as the center. However, before Ye Qinglian could breathe a sigh of relief, the woman in black attacked again. Buzz! A strange buzzing sound spread throughout the space, and she waved her jade hand, and a long black whip appeared in her palm. With a flick of her wrist, the black whip tail swept across the void and whipped Ye Qinglian's neck. The whip tail flashed a cold and dark light, like a poisonous snake probing its head, instantly tearing apart the spiritual light barrier on Ye Qinglian's body. Snap! Ye Qinglian only felt a chill on his neck, and suddenly groaned, staggering backwards, and almost fell to the ground. You actually broke my body barrier. Ye Qinglian widened his eyes and stared at the woman in black with shock on his face, a little unbelievable. Liasu did not answer, but continued to swing the whip and hit Ye Qinglian. Snap! 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 She moved very quickly, and in just a short moment, 3 red whip marks appeared on Ye Qinglian's skin. Asshole! Ye Qinglian gritted her teeth. She had never encountered such a strange enemy. Although she was a saint and her body was immortal, the opponent's attack still made her body painful. Most importantly, this was simply humiliating. No, I have to find a way to leave. If I continue like this, I'm afraid I will lose. Ye Qinglian's heart condensed. After this short fight, she knew that if she dragged it on, she would definitely suffer. It's better to leave here first and find a chance to take revenge later. So Ye Qinglian's mind moved quickly, and she immediately wanted to use the secret technique to get away. Want to leave? However, at this moment, the woman in the white dress suddenly sneered. Wow! In an instant, she formed seals with her bare hands, and spiritual spells were sent into the void. Huh! Ye Qinglian's face changed, and she felt that the surrounding environment suddenly changed. The world became extremely dark, as if it was trapped in the night. In an instant, Ye Qinglian's pores were horrified, as if she was bitten by a poisonous snake, and she couldn't even use the spiritual power in her body. Is this a formation? How is this possible? Ye Qinglian's heart was pounding, and her pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip, revealing a deep shock. Heh, you can't escape, Xuanhuan said lightly. She is best at formations. When Liasu attacked the opponent just now, she was not idle, but arranged formations around to trap the opponent. Otherwise, with the opponent's saint-level combat power, it would be difficult for them to stop him if he escaped. Swish! At this moment, Liasu had already killed Ye Qinglian again. She raised her wrist, and the long whip in her hand suddenly tightened, making a sharp explosion sound, and whipped towards Ye Qinglian with a devastating force. Not good. Ye Qinglian's pretty face changed wildly. She felt that the world around her was spinning, and she was firmly locked by the aura and could not move. What was even more desperate was that she found that no matter how she urged her spiritual power, there was no response, as if she had become immortal and could not mobilize any energy. She had no way to avoid this attack. Ye Qinglian's face was pale, and her mind was turning rapidly, but she could not find a way to resolve the crisis. Boom! The next moment, the whip tip was here. The whip tip was like a black dragon, swallowing the void and coming, with infinite power. No! Feeling the threat of death approaching, Ye Qinglian screamed miserably. But it was of no use at all. The next moment, her eyes went dark, and her consciousness fell into an endless drowsiness. When she woke up again, she felt sore and weak, as if her bones were broken. Ye Qinglian slowly opened her beautiful eyes, Her eyes were blank, and she looked around blankly. Where is this? Ye Qinglian widened her eyes and found herself lying in a black cage. The black cage was very small, and she couldn't even stand up straight in it. And the cage was engraved with dense runes and ancient spell patterns, emitting a mysterious and obscure wave. Obviously, this cage was not an ordinary thing. This. Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes widened. She remembered that she was whipped away by a black whip. How could she appear in this black iron cage? Could it be? Suddenly, she thought of something. She turned her head sharply and looked outside the black iron cage. A man in a black robe was standing in front of the cage, with a smile on his lips, looking at her with interest. Are you the great Qin Emperor? Ye Qinglian frowned and said coldly. As expected of a saint, your reaction is quick. Qin Mu smiled and praised. It's really you. Hearing this, Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes turned cold, and her voice was full of chill. Damn tyrant, you killed millions of my Qianyuan people, today I will take your dog life for them. Ye Qinglian shouted tenderly, and her whole body was surging with spiritual power, and she was about to activate her spiritual power. However, the next moment, her delicate body suddenly stiffened. Because she was shocked to find that her cultivation was completely imprisoned and could not be activated at all. Even when she tried to communicate with the life weapon in the spiritual sea in her body, it didn't listen to her at all. What the hell is this? Ye Qinglian's heart was shocked. What on earth did you do? Ye Qinglian was shocked and couldn't help but roared. Nothing. Qin Mu shook his head, and the smile on his face became brighter. He swung his sleeves, and the cage shook violently, the runes on it glowed, and an inexplicable and majestic force suppressed it. Qinglian fairy, right? It just so happens that I am a little angry now, and I need some Qinglian to calm down. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 149. Qin Mu walked to the cage with a smile on his face, and at the same time reached out and pinched Ye Qinglian's chin, forcing her to raise her head to look at him. Go away. Don't touch me. Ye Qinglian was furious and tried her best to resist. Qin Mu didn't force her. Seeing her fierce resistance, he let go and took 2 steps back. I'm warning you, if you dare to touch me again, I will destroy the Qin dynasty and make its lives miserable. Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes were filled with evil, and she stared at Qin Mu fiercely, with infinite coldness and hatred in her voice. Yet, Qin Mu's expression remained unchanged. He just sneered twice, and then he said something softly. Lisu, teach her the rules of Yeding Palace. After the words fell, a graceful figure walked slowly from a distance. According to the order. Liasu saluted respectfully, and then walked slowly to the cage. She glanced at Ye Qinglian, who was full of anger, then raised her jade palm and slapped Ye Qinglian's pretty face. Bang! The crisp slap resounded throughout the room. Ye Qinglian groaned, her cheeks suddenly became swollen, and a wisp of blood spilled from her mouth and nose, which was shocking. You dare to hit me? Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes were blazing, and she shouted angrily through gritted teeth. Oh, you're the one I'm beating, Liasu sneered, his eyes turned cold. You're just a slave, you don't know any dignity. After saying that, she waved her jade palm again and swung it at Ye Qinglian's pretty face. Bang bang bang. Liasu threw 3 more palms in succession. Every slap is extremely clear, crisp, and loud. Ye Qinglian's pretty face became red and swollen at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bitch, let me out if you can. See if I don't kill you all. And you. Ye Qinglian's delicate body trembled with anger, her chest heaved violently, and she gritted her teeth, almost crushing her silver teeth. She is regarded as a saint, with strong strength and noble status. She is usually aloof, but she has never been insulted like this. However, before she could finish her words, Liu Xuanhuan flicked his wrist, and a black chain came around. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, these black chains penetrated her whole body, binding her tightly. Yet Xinglian was completely powerless and was nailed to the cage. Let me go. Yet Xinglian was furious and struggled wildly, but it was useless. The more she struggled, the tighter the chains tied her. In the end, Ye Xinglian simply gave up her struggle and glared at Qin Mu, her pretty face as cold as water. You tyrant! You are so presumptuous, how can my master allow you to insult me? Liu Xu's pretty face was filled with anger, her beautiful eyes were extremely cold, and she raised her hand to strike again. Qin Mu calmly waved his hand to stop Liu Xu's move. He stared at Ye Xinglian with deep eyes. I have long heard that the holy fairy Xinglian of the Xuanhuan dynasty had a bad temper. When I saw her today, it turned out to be true. Qin Mu's eyes were cold and his tone was cold. The Xuanhuan dynasty invaded the Qin dynasty and harmed the name of our country, the Qin dynasty. It was really a heinous crime that is too numerous to describe. The Yi tribe should be destroyed and the 9 tribes should be killed for 3 generations. As a Xuanhuan saint, you are even more sinful and unforgivable. From today on, you will stay in Yeding Palace to repent and wash away your sins. Qin Mu's voice was bone-chilling and chilling, like a demonic voice coming from hell. You! Ye Xinglian's beautiful eyes were on fire, and her pretty face turned purple. Qin Mu, you beast, if you dare, kill me. Otherwise, I will destroy the Qin dynasty. Kill tens of millions of your people. I will make you a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, and not even a blade of grass will grow. Qin Mu smiled slightly when he heard this, his laughter full of sarcasm and ridicule. Don't worry, I won't kill you. And not only will I not kill you, I will also let you set a good example. Finally, Qin Mu waved gently. I saw a dozen trembling and beautiful women walking out of the dark corner. Ye Xinglian was stunned immediately. These women were none other than members of the royal family of the Xuanhuan dynasty. The 7th and 9th princesses of the Xuanhuan dynasty, the concubines of the Xuanhuan dynasty, as well as some relatives of the emperor and the female dependents of princes and nobles were all imprisoned here. Even, there is also the current queen of the Xuanhuan dynasty. At this time, they were disheveled, looked flustered, and looked at Qin Mu with fear on their faces. Looking at these familiar people, Ye Xinglian's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank, and her mood collapsed to the extreme. Qin Mu, what do you want to do? Ye Xinglian's face was as gloomy as frost, and she stared at Qin Mu. What not to do? Qin Mu chuckled, pointed at the group of beautiful women, and said softly. Look, these people are your descendants. What will they do if you die? So, in order for them to enjoy their old age, you must also live well. Qin Mu had a gentle voice and a smile on his face, speaking warm words like a kind father. Asshole, I'm going to tear you apart. Ye Xinglian was furious. Qin Mu was not angry, but smiled slightly. Just stay in the Yeding Palace and atone for your sins. I believe that one day, you will be able to understand what I said and get rid of your bad habits. You're dreaming, Ye Xinglian sneered. You don't believe it? Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and suddenly sighed. That's all, since you are so stubborn, then it's my fault. Qin Mu stood with his hands behind his hands, his eyes dark and his voice low. Liu Xu, please teach her how to repent. According to the order. Liu Xu bowed slightly, with a cold expression, and raised his slender white hands lightly. The next moment, countless dark chains emerged from the void, turned into a long whip, and whipped Ye Xinglian fiercely. Poof! When the long whip was drawn, Ye Qinglian's snow-white clothes were ripped to pieces on the spot, and her skin, as delicate as mutton fat and jade, was exposed in the void, like white snow, which was particularly dazzling. "Asshole! You dare to humiliate me!" Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes burst into flames, furious. If there were only a few of them here, she would definitely not be so angry, but there are still many of her descendants here. To embarrass her in front of so many juniors is simply more painful than killing her. Ye Xuanhuan, the third princess of Xuanhuan, couldn't bear to watch this scene. Her eyes were red with tears in her eyes, and she lowered her head silently. However, the next moment, a cold voice sounded in her ears. "Lift your heads and take a good look at me." Qin Mu put his hands behind his back and looked indifferent. "I hope you remember that in this great Qin dynasty, you are just lowly ants. Your lives are decided by me. But you can never escape this fate." His voice was cold, as if he had pronounced a death sentence. The girls trembled all over, and they were all as silent as cicadas, with a trace of despair and sadness rising in their hearts. The seventh princess Ye Xuanhuan could only slowly raise her head again and look at the saint Ye Qinglian in the prison. Once upon a time, Ye Qinglian was the only idol in her life, the goal she always wanted to pursue. But now, this female saint, who was once an invincible existence in her mind, has become a prisoner. For a moment, Ye Xuanhuan felt that her world had collapsed. The whole person fell into sadness and confusion. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 150. Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please spare Fairy Qinglian. I am willing to serve your Majesty. As Ye Xuanhuan's thoughts turned, the other women had already knelt on the ground, kowtowed and begged. However, Qin Mu looked at the scene indifferently, unmoved. Crack! Liasu whipped the whip again, and after a crisp sound, "Ah!" a shrill scream rang out. Bang! Bang! One whip after another, whipping Ye Qinglian non-stop. "Ah! Qin Mu, you will not die well." Ye Qinglian was beaten so furious that she screamed continuously. "I will remember you. When I get out of this predicament, I will definitely torture you to death." Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes almost spewed fire. At this time, Ye Qinglian's clothes were in disarray, and her snow-white skin was full of bruises and swellings. It was obvious that she was already scarred. Moreover, the whipping performed by Liasu was quite mysterious. It not only whipped the body, but also penetrated the soul, causing Ye Qinglian's soul to ache and become dazed. If she was not a saint, she would have collapsed long ago. But even so, Ye Qinglian was about to give up. She looked listless, her head drooped slightly, and she couldn't even curse. "Master, Ye Qinglian has completed her confession today." After a while, Liasu stopped her movements and turned around to ask respectfully. "Yes." Qin Mu nodded, and his eyes lightly swept over Ye Qinglian. "There is only one step left." Then he walked into the cage. What do you want to do?" Seeing this, Ye Qinglian suddenly lost her color, her pretty face turned pale, and she was inexplicably panicked. She felt that Qin Mu seemed to be preparing to do something, and she was inexplicably horrified and couldn't help trembling. You dare to touch me. Ziwei Fairy Palace will not let you go. You!" She screamed in panic, but stopped halfway through. Because Qin Mu had already reached out and grabbed her neck and lifted her up. I am a saint." Ye Qinglian's voice trembled, trying to stay calm. Qin Mu nodded, his eyes teasing, "I know, so I will personally judge your mistakes." The next moment, Ye Qinglian's beautiful eyes slightly opened, and her pupils dilated. At the same time, over the sky of Xuanhuan Imperial City, which had become a ruin, a dozen extremely powerful and vast auras suddenly appeared. These auras filled the void, causing the wind and clouds to change, shaking the sky, as dazzling as the sun. This was a saint from Xiwei Fairy Palace. But at this time, they looked down with astonishment on their faces. The imperial city of Xuanhuan was destroyed. Who is so bold as to destroy the imperial city of Xuanhuan? It must have been the work of the great Qin. Unforgivable. Killing innocent people is a crime worthy of death. The consciousness of the 10 Xiwei saints spread, and the sound of their conversation resounded throughout the space. For a moment, they were furious. They came here with the ostensible mission of providing support. But they didn't expect that Xuanhuan would be destroyed as soon as they arrived. At this time, a girl in a blue skirt flew down with tears in her eyes. "Father." The girl was about 28 years old, with skin whiter than snow, peerless appearance, charming and graceful, an ethereal temperament. She was wearing a light green logo skirt, with a graceful figure, and her eyebrows vaguely resembled Yeching Lian. She was the third princess of the Xuanhuan dynasty, Yejinghong. She was also a direct disciple of Xiwei Fairy Palace, and this time she went to Xuanhuan with the 10 saints. At this time, she was in tears, grief-stricken, and knelt on the ruins of the Xuanhuan Palace and cried, "Father! Father! How could this happen?" Yejinghong knelt on the ground, crying like a pear blossom in the rain. Her head was buzzing and she almost fainted. Her father died and Xuanhuan was destroyed. This was a huge change for her, like the sky falling and the earth collapsing. Even the 10 saints suspended in the void saw the scene and felt a little bit unbearable. "Father! Mother! What on earth have you encountered?" Yejinghong lay on the ruins, crying out in grief, like a cuckoo crying blood and a monkey wailing. Alas! A middle-aged man in a purple robe sighed. "Little girl, I am in mourning. The dead are gone, and the living need to continue to live." The other 2 Xiwei saints also sighed. "I want revenge." Yejinghong stood up suddenly without stopping crying. "All this must be done by Qin Mu, he must have killed my father and mother. I want revenge, I must kill him with my own hands." The middle-aged man in purple robe nodded slightly and said lightly, "The Qin dynasty has indeed gone too far in this matter. We will definitely not stand idly by and will seek justice for you." "Thank you, Saint." Hearing this, Yejinghong burst into tears of joy. "Okay." At this time, another thin and haggard old man suddenly spoke and whispered, let's go to the northern border of the Qin dynasty first to take a look, so as not to be beaten by others." "Yes." Yejinghong wiped away his tears and calmed down. Soon, the group turned into a long rainbow and left. Almost at the same time, at the edge of the northern border of the Qin dynasty, a cloud of black smoke was rushing at a very fast speed. Around this cloud of smoke, there were bright stars. And in the center of the smoke, there stood an ancient and vicissitudes of life building ship. This building ship was as black as ink, surrounded by dense runes, emitting a layer of hazy black and gold light. Although the aura was hidden, there was still a monstrous majesty emanating from it. This building ship was surprisingly a quasi-emperor weapon. At this time, a man covered in hazy divine light stood with his hands behind his back on this building ship. As his eyes flickered, there seemed to be endless sword light bursting out. It was the palace master of Xiang Palace in Fengling Domain, Sidu Daequan. "Is this the great Qin dynasty?" Sidu Daequan looked down at the wasteland below, with a trace of disdain between his eyebrows. "A mere barbarian country is really not worth mentioning." Beside him, many disciples responded one after another, all with pride. Xiang Palace is the leader of the 10 major sects in Fengling Domain. It was once a sect that produced great emperors, and now it has been in Fengling Domain for tens of thousands of years with profound heritage and huge power. In addition, Fengling Domain is located in the center of the 9 domains of the human race, while Tianlan domain is the southernmost of the 9 domains of the human race. In Situ Daequan's view, Tianlan domain is a barbarian land, and the Great Qin dynasty located in Tianlan domain is a barbarian country. Master, the strength of the Great Qin dynasty seems to be no less than that of my Xiang palace. My disciple heard that the Great Qin dynasty killed 9 saints in Chang'an city in one fell swoop. Behind Situ Daequan, a girl in green spoke in a low voice.